and welcome to the Pathfinder Lair. My name is Drew and I've been a game master for over 10 years. On this channel, I help new players understand the rules of the Pathfinder 2nd Edition system. Today in the Lair, I will be covering what I missed in the Gnome and Goblin ancestry videos from the Lost Omens character guide. I'm sorry that I missed this in the last video, but I am covering them now. I will start with gnomes and then move on to goblins. First up is the one heritage in this book for gnomes, the vivacious gnome. These gnomes are resistant to negative effects. They gain negative resistance equal to half their level with a minimum of 1. In addition, they also reduce their doom condition by 1 whenever they have it. So doomed 1 has no effect. Doomed 2 means they die at dying 3, and so on. There are quite a few creatures and spells out there that do negative damage, especially if you run into a lot of undead. So this heritage is actually pretty good. The doom thing is just a bonus. Definitely consider this heritage if you are playing a gnome. Now I will cover the first level ancestry feats, starting with gnome polyglots. This is almost identical to the nomadic halfling heritage, except that you get 3 languages to start with, and 3 extra languages every time you take the multilingual feats. This is even more of the I can talk to everyone thing than the nomadic halfling. If you want to be able to do this as a gnome, take this feat. Otherwise, take a different one. Next is Grim Insights. You must have the Umbral Gnome heritage in order to take this feat. Whenever you roll a success on a saving throw against a fear effect, you get a critical success instead, and the source of that fear is flat-footed against you until the end of your next turn. Fear effects don't happen all that much, so this isn't a great feat. Inventive Offensive pretty much allows you to add certain traits, such as Deadly D6 and Trip, to any weapon that you wield that doesn't already have the trait as a 3-action activity. It retains this trait until you hit and deal damage, and only while you wield it. Also, you can only have one such weapon modified at any one time. If you are an expert in crafting, it only takes 2 actions to use this feat. If you are legendary in crafting, you can add 2 traits to the weapon. This feat gives you a ton of versatility. Want to trip someone with your weapon? Go ahead. You want to disarm them? Sure. And it goes on. Very good feat. Consider this at first level. Life-giving magic gives you a once per minute, yes, once per minute, not per day or per hour, reaction. With the trigger, you cast an innate spell from a gnome heritage or ancestry feat. You gain temporary hit points equal to half your level with a minimum of 1 that lasts until the end of your next turn. Very good feat. You just cast a spell and get temporary hit points. Fantastic. 5th is Natural Performer. You become trained in the performance skill and gain any one first level performance skill feat. Very good feat. Becoming trained in performance and getting any performance skill feat to go with it is broken. Just completely broken. Theoretical Acumen gives you a free action with the trigger. You succeed on a skill check to recall knowledge to identify a creature. This feat allows you to use your skill check modifier instead of other modifiers in regards to that creature. You can also use the DC of that skill in place of your AC against one of that creature's attacks. If you have high intelligence but low on other checks, this feat can be really good. If you have high skill checks, consider taking this feat. Unexpected Shift gives you a reaction with the trigger. You would take damage from an attack, spell, or other effect. Roll a DC 16 flat check. On a success, you gain resistance to that effect equal to your level, and a +2 bonus on the saving throw against that effect, but you also gain the Dazzle condition for 1 round. This feat is really good. Being able to gain resistance to any damage and a bonus to the saving throw once per round is completely broken. Definitely consider this feat at first level. Finally, for first level gnome feats, we have the Vibrant Display feats. This feat requires the Chameleon Gnome Heritage. You can use this feat once every 10 minutes. When you use the Feint action, you can use it on all adjacent creatures instead of just one of them within melee reach. It is possible to get a different degree of success for each target. If you use the Feint action a lot, take this feat. Otherwise, take a different one. Now we come to 5th level feats for the Gnome. First up is Eclectic Obsession. This feat requires the Gnome Obsession Ancestry feat to take. You can find that in my Gnome video, which is up in the card. This feat can be used once per day. You become trained in any one lore skill for 10 minutes or until you crit fail a check with that skill. This training is temporary, so you can't use it for a feat or skill increase. This feat is very good. There is a lore skill for every subject imaginable, so this feat allows you to know about any subject. Consider this feat at 5th level. Next is Intuitive Illusions. This feat requires the Illusion Sense Ancestry feat. You can use this feat once per day as a free action when your turn begins. You immediately gain the effects of the Sustain a Spell action on one of your active illusions. This feat is only good if you use illusion magic a lot. If you do not, don't take this feat. Lastly, for 5th level ancestry feats for the gnome in this book is the Natural Illusionist feat. This feat also requires the Illusion Sense Ancestry feat. Once per day, you can cast Ventriloquism, Illusory Disguise, or Item Facade. At 7th level, the spell that you pick for that day is heightened to 2nd level, and every 2 levels after that, it is heightened to the next spell level up. This feat is very good. The spells it gives you are pretty situational, and you only get one of them per day, but they are heightened as you level up. The last feat for the gnome in this book is the 9th level feat, Fortuitous Shift. This feat requires the Unexpected Shift Ancestry feat to take. When you use Unexpected Shift, the DC is reduced to 11, and you are no longer dazzled if you succeed. This feat is just a better version of Unexpected Shift, and Unexpected Shift was already pretty good. Consider this feat at 9th level. Now we can move on to Goblin Heritages and Feats. Let's start with the Tailed Goblin Heritage. You gain a +2 bonus on Athletics check to climb, and the Combat Climber skill feat. In addition, you reduce the number of hands needed to climb or trip by 1. This heritage is situational. Depends on how often you're going to need to climb. Next is the Tree Dweller Goblin Heritage. As long as you are in a forest or jungle, you gain a +2 bonus on stealth checks to hide or sneak, on survival checks to subsist, and to your survival DC to cover tracks. This heritage isn't that great. You're going to be in caves and underground much more often than you're going to be in a forest or jungle. I would not recommend taking this heritage. Now let's talk about 1st level ancestry feats for the goblin, starting with Bouncy Goblin. You become trained in acrobatics. You also gain a +2 circumstance bonus on checks to tumble through an enemy space. This feat is okay. It gives you another skill, which is great, but that's about it. Next is Fang Sharpener. This feat requires either the Iron Gut Goblin or the Razor-Tooth Goblin heritage. If you are an Iron Gut Goblin, you gain a Jaws unarmed attack that deals 1d4 piercing damage. If you are a Razor-Tooth Goblin, your Jaws now deal 1d8 piercing damage and lose the Finesse trait. If you get a critical hit with your Jaws, the opponent takes 1 persistent bleed damage per weapon damage dice. If you want to bite people as a goblin, this is the feat for you. Otherwise, take a different one. Both of these heritages you will find in my Goblin Ancestry album video, linked in the card. Finally, for 1st level ancestry feats for the goblin, we have Hard Tail. This feat requires the Tailed Goblin heritage, which I covered earlier in this video. You gain a tail unarmed attack that deals 1d6 bludgeoning damage. This feat is okay. If you want to go for a natural weapon build, consider this feat. Otherwise, take something else. For 5th level ancestry feats, I will start with Ankle Bite. This feat requires either the Fang Sharpener feat or the Razor-Tooth Goblin heritage. You gain a reaction with the trigger. A foe gives you the grabbed or restrained condition using part of its body. You bite the foe. Make a Jaws unarmed attack. If you get a critical hit, you are no longer grabbed. This feat is okay at this level, but it's even better at high levels when a lot of creatures have the grab ability. I would recommend taking this feat if you qualify for it. Next is Chosen of Lamashtu. This feat requires you to be a worshipper of the deity Lamashtu. You gain the benefits of a second Goblin heritage, and you count as that heritage for the purpose of qualifying for feats and other abilities. That's it. Not much to this feat, but getting a second heritage and its benefits is really good. Third, we have the Tailspin feats. This feat requires the Tailed Goblin heritage and the Hardtail Goblin ancestry feat. For 2 actions, you can make an athletics check to trip 2 creatures, rolling once for both creatures. If you get a success against the target, you instead actually get a critical success. If you want to trip people, this is an excellent feat. If you don't want to do that, take something else. Torch Goblin is a feat that just screams Goblin. You must have the Charhide Goblin heritage to take this feat. You can light yourself on fire with any incendiary. Doing so causes 1d6 persistent fire damage. However, as long as you are on fire, your weapons and unarmed attacks deal 1 additional fire damage per damage dice. Any creature that successfully grapples, shoves, or trips you takes 1d6 fire damage. If they use a weapon for these actions, the weapon takes the damage. You must still make flat checks to get rid of the persistent fire damage each round. Because you are a Charhide Goblin, I would rule that if you get the damage down to 0 at level 12 for maximum, this feat becomes useless. So it's good at first if you use fire damage, but once you hit level 12, it's gone. This feat either requires the Tailed Goblin or the Tree Dweller Goblin heritage. This feat just gives you a climb speed of 10 feet. Also, if you have the Cave Climber Ancestry feat, your climb speed increases to your land speed when climbing trees. This feat is situational. Whether it is good or not depends on how much you are going to need to climb. If you're climbing a lot, take this feat. Otherwise, take a different one. Now let's talk about 9th level Goblin Ancestry feats, starting with Freeze It. This feat requires the Snow Goblin heritage. You can attempt an athletics check against the Fortitude DC of an adjacent foe. If you are a master in athletics, you can target up to 2 foes with this feat, rolling separately for each foe. On a critical success, the target is Clumsy 2 for 1 round. On a success, the target is Clumsy 1 for 1 round. If you get a critical failure, the target is unaffected and immune to this feat for 1 minute. This feat is pretty good, especially if the foe relies on dexterity for its abilities. Plus, Clumsy applies to its AC as well. If it is clumsy and flat-footed, it effectively takes a -4 to its AC. Consider this feat if you are a Snow Goblin. Next we have the Hungry Goblin Ancestry feat. This feat requires the Fang Sharpener feat. Whenever you deal persistent bleed damage with your Jaws unarmed attack, you gain temporary hit points equal to half your level for 1 minute. If you actually use your Jaws a lot, this feat is very good. You get a little bit of healing every time you crit someone with your bite attack. This can be the difference between going unconscious and staying in the fight. Third is Roll With It. This feat requires the Unbreakable Goblin heritage and the Bouncy Goblin Ancestry feat. It gives you a reaction with the trigger. A foe hits you with a melee weapon or unarmed strike. When you use this feat, your foe can move you any distance of its choice up to 30 feet in the direction of its choice. This is not forced movement and triggers reactions based on movement. You fall prone and are stunned to 1. Attempt a DC 6 flat check. On a success, you take the minimum possible damage, and on a critical success, even if the attack was a critical hit, you don't take double damage. This feat is really good, especially if you're low on hit points. DC 6 is not that much of a DC. You will probably make this check about 90% of the time. Consider this feat at 9th level. Finally, for 9th level Ancestry feats, we have the Scalding Spit feat. This feat requires the Torch Goblin Ancestry feat to take, which I covered earlier in this video. As long as you are taking persistent fire damage from any source, and not just from Torch Goblin, you gain a Boiling Spit ranged unarmed attack with a range of 30 feet that deals 1d6 fire damage. What is interesting about this feat is that it is the only ability that I have found that gives you a ranged unarmed attack. Most unarmed attacks are melee strikes. Unlike the Torch Goblin Ancestry feat, this feat could be useful after level 12. It just depends on how much persistent fire damage you run into. The last Ancestry feat for goblins in this book is the 13th level feat, Unbreakable Goblin. This feat requires the Unbreakable Goblin Heritage. You gain 10 more hit points from your ancestry. So just straight up 10 extra hit points. That alone makes this feat really good. But there's more to it as well. You also don't take any fall damage no matter how far you fall. In addition, if you have the Bouncy Goblin feat, after falling or jumping at least 20 feet, you can bounce back up into the air, up to half the distance you fell, and up to half as far forward if you jumped. These bounces continue until you bounce less than 20 feet. That second part is really cool, but it isn't explained well. What happens if you hit another creature while you are bouncing? Do they take damage? Do they have to make an acrobatics check to move out of the way? What? It doesn't say. It's GM discretion. And that's going to wrap up this video. Be sure to check out the other videos on my channel, including the Human Ancestry video and my Lost Omens character guide video on dwarves and elves that also came out this week. If you aren't subscribed and my videos help you, don't forget to do that. Also, if you have any questions, leave them in the comments or in the Pathfinder Lair Facebook group. Link in the description. Next week, I will be continuing my Ancestry album series with the Catfolk and Kobold Ancestries. So until next time, let's play some Pathfinder. 1, 2, 3, 4.